In the heart of a gripping narrative lies the story of Robert Crandall and Jonathan Talley, two individuals whose lives intersected under harrowing circumstances. Robert, a dedicated advocate for justice, found himself compelled to share Jonathan's story from the confines of a prison cell. Jonathan, a man grappling with the weight of his circumstances, faced a mental state that was as fragile as it was urgent. His situation was dire, marked by a sense of impending doom that loomed over him like a dark cloud. As Robert delved into Jonathan's plight, he uncovered layers of fear and despair that painted a chilling picture of reality. The urgency of Jonathan's situation was palpable. He was not merely a prisoner, but a man whose very existence hung in the balance, caught in a web of uncertainty and dread. Robert's role became that of a beacon of hope, illuminating Jonathan's story for the world to see, while also highlighting the psychological turmoil that accompanied his incarceration. The narrative unfolds with a sense of foreboding as Robert navigates the complexities of Jonathan's experiences, revealing the stark contrast between the life he once knew and the grim reality of his current existence. Each detail shared by Robert serves to deepen the reader's understanding of Jonathan's mental state, characterized by anxiety and a desperate longing for freedom. The chilling atmosphere is further enhanced by the stark realities of prison life, where fear often overshadows hope, and the struggle for survival becomes a daily battle. As Robert recounts Jonathan's experiences, the tone shifts between moments of despair and flickers of resilience, creating a narrative that is both haunting and compelling. The urgency of Jonathan's situation is underscored by the ticking clock of his confinement, a constant reminder that time is not on his side. Robert's commitment to sharing Jonathan's story becomes a race against time, as he seeks to bring attention to the injustices faced by those behind bars. The chilling reality of Jonathan's mental state is laid bare, revealing the psychological scars that prison life can inflict. As the narrative unfolds, readers are drawn into a world where fear is a constant companion, and the line between hope and despair blurs. Robert's determination to shed light on Jonathan's plight serves as a powerful reminder of the human spirit's resilience, even in the darkest of circumstances. The chilling narrative explores the depths of fear and the harsh realities of life behind bars, inviting readers to confront the uncomfortable truths that often lie hidden beneath the surface. Through Robert's eyes, we witness the urgency of Jonathan's situation, a reminder that every story deserves to be told, especially those that echo the cries for justice and understanding. As the chilling tale of Robert Crandall and Jonathan Talley unfolds, it becomes clear that their intertwined fates are not just a story of despair, but also a testament to the enduring power of hope and the relentless pursuit of truth. The urgency of Jonathan's situation, coupled with Robert's unwavering commitment to sharing his story, sets the stage for a narrative that is both haunting and thought-provoking. In a world where fear can often overshadow reality, the story of Robert and Jonathan serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of empathy, understanding, and the relentless pursuit of justice for those who find themselves trapped in the shadows of society. As we delve deeper into their story, we are compelled to confront the chilling realities that exist within the prison system and the profound impact it has on the human psyche. The narrative invites us to reflect on the complexities of fear, the fragility of hope, and the urgent need for change in a world that often turns a blind eye to the struggles of the marginalized. As night descended upon New York City, the vibrant pulse of the metropolis transformed into a symphony of shadows and flickering lights. The streets, usually bustling with life, took on a different character after dark, where the neon signs glowed, like beacons against the inky backdrop of the sky. The air was thick with a mix of excitement and unease, as the sounds of distant sirens and the chatter of late-night revelers blended into a haunting melody that echoed through the canyons of steel and glass. Robert Crandall, navigating the labyrinthine streets, felt the weight of the city's energy pressing against him, a reminder that beneath its glamorous facade lay an undercurrent of unpredictability. As he made his way to the subway station, the atmosphere shifted. The entrance loomed ahead, a gaping maw that swallowed the light and exhaled a cool, damp breeze. Descending the stairs, Robert was greeted by the familiar scent of metal and concrete, mingled with the faint aroma of street food wafting from above. The subway platform was dimly lit, casting long shadows that danced along the tiled walls, creating an unsettling ambience. The rhythmic clatter of trains echoed in the distance, a reminder of the city's relentless movement. Yet the platform felt eerily deserted, as if the night had conspired to keep its secrets hidden. As Robert waited for the train, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The flickering fluorescent lights above cast an unsettling glow, illuminating the faces of the few stragglers who shared the platform with him. Each person seemed lost in their own world, their expressions a mix of fatigue and indifference. It was then that he noticed a strange man standing a few feet away, his presence unsettling in the otherwise mundane setting. The man was dressed in a tattered coat, his hair unkempt and wild, giving him an almost spectral appearance. He leaned against a pillar, his eyes darting around as if searching for something or someone. Robert's heart quickened as he caught the man's gaze. There was something unnerving about the way he stared, a penetrating look that seemed to peel back the layers of Robert's very being. The man's eyes were dark and hollow, reflecting a depth of experience that felt both intriguing and terrifying. As the train approached, the screech of metal on metal filled the air, drowning out the ambient sounds of the station. The lights from the train illuminated the platform, casting an eerie glow that momentarily revealed the man's features in stark relief. Robert felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped back instinctively, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. As the train doors slid open, Robert hesitated, glancing back at the strange man. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a sense that something was about to unfold. The man's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile, and for a moment, Robert felt as if he were caught in a web of fate, the threads of which were woven by the very fabric of the city itself. The train's interior beckoned him, a sanctuary, from the unsettling atmosphere of the platform. Yet he felt an inexplicable pull to remain, to confront the unknown. With a deep breath, Robert stepped onto the train, the doors sliding shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the silence. As the train lurched forward, he stole a glance back at the platform, where the strange man had vanished into the shadows, leaving behind an unsettling void. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels against the tracks became a haunting backdrop to his thoughts, amplifying the eerie feeling that had begun to unfold within him. The city outside blurred into a kaleidoscope of lights, but inside the train a sense of isolation enveloped him, as if he were traversing not just the physical space of New York City, but also the darker recesses of his own mind. The atmosphere of the subway, once a familiar comfort, now felt charged with an unsettling energy. Each stop brought a new wave of passengers, their faces illuminated by the harsh overhead lights. Yet Robert felt increasingly disconnected from them. The strange man lingered in his thoughts, a specter of unease that refused to dissipate. As the train continued its journey through the dark tunnels, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that the night held secrets yet to be revealed, and that the city, with all its vibrancy, was also a place where fear and reality intertwined in ways he had yet to fully comprehend. As the subway train rattled through the darkened tunnels of New York City, Robert's mind was still reeling from the unsettling encounter with the wild-eyed man on the platform. The man had appeared almost out of nowhere, his presence a jarring contrast to the otherwise mundane atmosphere of the subway station. He was disheveled, with unkempt hair that framed his gaunt face, and his clothes were a patchwork of tattered fabric that hung loosely from his thin frame. The coat he wore was frayed at the edges, its color faded to a dull gray, and it seemed to swallow him whole, as if he were a ghost wandering the streets of the city. Robert couldn't shake the image of the man's eyes, wide and darting, filled with a frenetic energy that was both captivating and terrifying. They glimmered with a wild intensity, as if he were perpetually on the brink of some revelation or madness. The man's gaze seemed to pierce through the layers of Robert's composure, exposing a vulnerability he hadn't realized was there. As the train lurched forward, Robert felt a growing sense of dread settle in the pit of his stomach, a gnawing anxiety that intensified with each passing moment. The train was now filled with a mix of late-night commuters, their faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. Yet despite the presence of others, Robert felt an isolating weight pressing down on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the wild-eyed man's warning had somehow shifted the atmosphere around him. The air felt charged, thick with an unspoken tension that made it difficult to breathe. He glanced around at the other passengers, their expressions a blend of fatigue and indifference, but none seemed to notice the unsettling energy that had enveloped him. Suddenly, the memory of the man's voice echoed in Robert's mind, a haunting whisper that sent chills down his spine. "There's a man behind you," the wild-eyed man had said, his tone urgent yet cryptic. The warning had come out of nowhere, delivered with a fervor that suggested he believed every word. Robert had dismissed it at first, chalking it up to the ramblings of a disturbed individual. But now, as he sat on the train, the words replayed in his head like a sinister mantra. He couldn't help but glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but the aisle behind him was empty, save for the flickering lights that cast eerie shadows on the walls. With each passing moment, Robert's confusion deepened. Who was this man, and why had he felt compelled to deliver such a cryptic warning? The wild-eyed man's demeanor had been erratic, his movements jerky and unpredictable, as if he were caught in a perpetual state of agitation. He had leaned in closer, his breath ragged, and Robert could smell the stale scent of sweat and something else, something metallic and unsettling. The man's eyes had locked onto Robert's, and for a brief moment, it felt as if they were sharing a secret, a connection forged in the depths of fear. As the train continued its journey, Robert's heart raced. He felt as if he were caught in a web of paranoia, the wild-eyed man's warning echoing in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. The other passengers remained oblivious to his growing unease, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones or lost in thought. But Robert couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the man's warning was not just the ramblings of a madman, but a genuine forewarning of danger. The train screeched to a halt at the next station, and the doors slid open, with a mechanical hiss. A few passengers shuffled out, but Robert remained seated, his mind racing. He felt trapped, as if the walls of the subway car were closing in on him. The wild-eyed man's words hung in the air, a specter of dread that refused to dissipate. He glanced at the reflection in the window, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking behind him, but the glass only revealed the dimly lit interior of the train. As the doors closed once more, Robert's heart pounded in his chest. The train lurched forward again, plunging deeper into the darkness of the tunnels. He could feel the weight of the wild-eyed man's warning pressing down on him, a chilling reminder that in a city as vast and unpredictable as New York, danger could lurk around any corner, or even right behind him. The unsettling interaction replayed in his mind, and with each passing moment, the line between reality and paranoia blurred, leaving Robert to grapple with the fear that perhaps the wild-eyed man had seen something he had yet to comprehend. In the days following the unsettling encounter on the subway, Robert Kandle found himself ensnared in a web of anxiety and confusion that he couldn't quite shake off. The wild-eyed man's cryptic warning echoed in his mind, a haunting refrain that seemed to reverberate through every aspect of his life. What had once been a routine existence in the bustling heart of New York City now felt like a precarious balancing act, teetering on the edge of paranoia. The psychological impact of that brief interaction began to manifest in ways he never anticipated, casting a long shadow over his daily activities. Robert's mornings, once filled with the invigorating rush of coffee and the anticipation of a new day, now began with a sense of dread. He would wake up, heart racing, as memories of the subway incident flooded back. The wild-eyed man's piercing gaze haunted him, and the urgency in his voice felt like a warning that he couldn't ignore. Each time he stepped outside, Robert felt as if he were being watched, the city's vibrant energy morphing into a suffocating blanket of unease. The familiar streets transformed into a labyrinth of potential threats, and he found himself hyper-aware of his surroundings, scanning for any sign of danger lurking just beyond his line of sight. Strange occurrences began to follow him, amplifying his sense of paranoia. It started subtly. He would catch glimpses of shadowy figures out of the corner of his eye, only to turn and find nothing there. One evening, as he walked home from work, he noticed a man in a tattered coat standing on the corner, his wild hair illuminated by the streetlight. Robert's heart raced as he quickened his pace, convinced it was the same man from the subway. But when he glanced back, the figure had vanished, leaving Robert questioning his own sanity. Was he truly seeing things, or was there something more sinister at play? As the days turned into weeks, Robert's anxiety deepened. He began to experience vivid nightmares, each one more disturbing than the last. In these dreams, the wild-eyed man would appear, his voice echoing ominously, warning Robert of a looming threat. Each time he awoke, drenched in sweat, he would sit up in bed, heart pounding, desperately trying to rationalize the experiences that felt increasingly surreal. He told himself that it was just stress, that the pressures of work and life in the city were getting to him. Yet, deep down, he knew that something had shifted within him, a fragile thread of reality that had begun to unravel. In an attempt to regain control, Robert sought solace in routine. He immersed himself in work, throwing himself into projects and meetings, hoping that the distraction would quell the rising tide of anxiety. Yet even in the office, he felt the weight of the wild-eyed man's warning pressing down on him. He would often find himself glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows of the cubicles. His colleagues noticed the change in him, the way he seemed distant and preoccupied. But Robert brushed off their concerns, insisting he was just tired. To further rationalize his experiences, Robert turned to research. He delved into articles about urban legends and psychological phenomena, searching for explanations that could make sense of the bizarre occurrences surrounding him. He read about the effects of stress on perception, how the mind could play tricks in moments of heightened anxiety. Perhaps the wild-eyed man was merely a figment of his imagination, a manifestation of his fears and insecurities. Yet, as he read, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the encounter, a deeper truth that eluded him. Despite his efforts to rationalize the situation, Robert found himself increasingly isolated. Friends reached out, but he often declined invitations, preferring the safety of his apartment to the unpredictability of social interactions. The city that had once felt like a vibrant tapestry of life now seemed like a maze filled with potential dangers. He avoided the subway, opting for long walks instead, even if it meant arriving late to work. Each step felt like a small victory against the encroaching dread. Yet the wild-eyed man's warning lingered in the back of his mind, a constant reminder that he was not entirely free from the shadows that haunted him. As the weeks dragged on, Robert grappled with the realization that he could no longer dismiss the impact of that fateful encounter. The wild-eyed man had not only disrupted his routine, but had also unearthed a deeper fear within him, a fear of the unknown, of the unpredictable nature of life itself. The psychological toll of the incident weighed heavily on him, and he began to understand that the journey to reclaim his sense of safety would be a long and arduous one. Each day was a battle against the creeping shadows of doubt and fear, and Robert knew that he had to confront the lingering specter of that encounter if he ever hoped to find peace again. As the days turned into weeks, Robert Crandall's life became a relentless cycle of anxiety and dread, each moment tinged with the unsettling sensation of being followed and watched. The wild-eyed man's warning echoed in his mind like a sinister mantra, and Robert found himself spiraling deeper into a chasm of paranoia. It was as if an invisible thread connected him to that encounter, pulling taut with every passing day, tightening around his chest until it felt nearly impossible to breathe. Every time Robert stepped outside, the city's vibrant energy morphed into a suffocating blanket of unease. He could feel eyes on him, a prickling sensation that crawled up his spine and settled in the back of his mind. The bustling streets of New York, once a source of comfort and excitement, now felt like a labyrinth filled with hidden dangers. He would walk briskly, glancing over his shoulder every few moments, half expecting to see the wild-eyed man lurking in the shadows. The thought alone sent shivers down his spine, and he often found himself quickening his pace, desperate to escape the invisible gaze that seemed to follow him. Specific incidents began to blur the line between reality and paranoia. One evening, as Robert left a cafe after work, he noticed a figure standing across the street, partially obscured by the flickering glow of a street lamp. The man's coat was tattered, and his hair was wild, just like the wild-eyed man from the subway. Robert's heart raced as he instinctively ducked into an alley, pressing his back against the cool brick wall, hoping to remain unseen. He peered around the corner, watching as the figure shifted slightly, scanning the street as if searching for something or someone. Robert's breath quickened, and he felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Was it really the same man, or was his mind playing tricks on him? The uncertainty gnawed at him, amplifying his fear. Another incident occurred a few nights later, when Robert was walking home from work. The streets were dimly lit, and the usual sounds of the city felt muted, as if the world had conspired to create an eerie silence. He could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in around him, and the sensation of being watched intensified. As he turned a corner, he caught a glimpse of a figure in his peripheral vision. It was a fleeting sight, but it sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He turned abruptly, but the street was empty, save for the distant hum of traffic. The feeling of being followed was suffocating, and Robert's mind raced with possibilities. Was he truly alone, or was someone lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike? The psychological toll of these experiences began to manifest in more profound ways. Robert found it increasingly difficult to concentrate at work, his thoughts consumed by the fear that someone was watching him. Meetings became a blur, and he struggled to engage with colleagues, often zoning out mid-conversation as his mind spiraled into a vortex of anxiety. He would catch himself glancing toward the door, half expecting to see the wild-eyed man walk in, his gaze fixed on Robert with that unsettling intensity. The fear of being followed seeped into every aspect of his life, eroding his sense of safety and stability. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by restless nights filled with vivid nightmares. Each time he closed his eyes, he was transported back to the subway, the wild-eyed man's voice echoing in his ears, warning him of the danger that lurked behind him. He would wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, convinced that someone was in his apartment, watching him from the shadows. The exhaustion weighed heavily on him, and he found himself withdrawing from friends and family, unable to articulate the turmoil that churned within him. The isolation only deepened his paranoia, creating a vicious cycle that felt impossible to escape. Robert's once vibrant world had become a prison of his own making, where every corner held the potential for danger and every shadow concealed a threat. He began to avoid certain streets, opting for longer routes that felt safer, even if they took him out of his way. The city that had once felt like a playground of possibilities now seemed like a maze of fear, each step a reminder of the wild-eyed man's presence. He would often find himself standing still, frozen in place, as the sensation of being watched washed over him like a tidal wave. The psychological toll of this relentless fear began to manifest physically. Robert experienced headaches and stomach aches that seemed to come out of nowhere, symptoms of the anxiety that had taken root in his mind. He felt as if he were living in a constant state of fight or flight, his body on high alert for any sign of danger. The weight of his paranoia pressed down on him, and he struggled to find a way to break free from the grip of fear that had ensnared him. In moments of clarity, Robert tried to rationalize his experiences, telling himself that he was simply being paranoid, that the wild-eyed man was just a figment of his imagination. But deep down, he knew that the feeling of being followed was all too real, a shadow that loomed over him, refusing to fade. The psychological toll of his experiences left him feeling trapped in a nightmare from which he couldn't awaken, and he began to wonder if he would ever reclaim the sense of safety and normalcy that had once defined his life. The night of the party arrived, a gathering meant to celebrate the end of a long work project. But for Robert Crandle, it felt like a ticking time bomb. The invitation had been extended weeks earlier, and despite his growing anxiety, he had reluctantly agreed to attend, hoping that a night of socializing would help him shake off the shadows that had been haunting him. Yet, as he prepared for the evening, the familiar sense of dread settled in the pit of his stomach, a reminder of the wild-eyed man's warning that had become an unwelcome companion in his life. As he arrived at the venue, a trendy loft in the heart of Manhattan, the atmosphere buzzed with laughter and conversation. The vibrant energy of the party contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing inside him. Robert forced a smile as he greeted colleagues, but his mind was elsewhere, constantly scanning the room for any sign of danger. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist in the dim lighting, and he felt the weight of every gaze upon him, as if the very walls were closing in. He tried to engage in small talk, but his thoughts were consumed by the nagging feeling that he was being watched, that the wild-eyed man was somehow lurking just beyond his line of sight. As the night wore on, Robert's anxiety escalated. He excused himself from a conversation and stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, but the beauty of the scene was lost on him. He leaned against the railing, trying to steady his racing heart, when he caught a glimpse of a figure across the street. The man was dressed in a tattered coat, his hair wild and unkempt, and Robert's blood ran cold. It was him, the wild-eyed man. Panic surged through him, and he felt the world around him begin to spin. In that moment of sheer terror, Robert's instincts kicked in. He turned to rush back inside, desperate to escape the suffocating grip of fear that had taken hold of him. But as he pushed through the door, he collided with a group of partygoers, sending drinks flying and laughter turning to gasps. The chaos erupted around him, and Robert's heart raced as he stumbled backward, his mind racing with thoughts of the man outside. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, their expressions shifting from surprise to concern, but all he could think about was the threat he believed was closing in. "Robert, are you okay?" a colleague asked, concern etched on her face, but he barely registered her words. The wild-eyed man's presence loomed larger in his mind, and he felt an overwhelming urge to flee. In his panic, he shouted, "Get away from me!" The words came out harsher than he intended, and the room fell silent, all eyes now fixed on him. The laughter faded, replaced by an uncomfortable tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. In that moment, Robert's fear reached a crescendo. He turned to leave, but as he did, he caught sight of the wild-eyed man again, this time standing at the entrance of the loft. The man's eyes were wide, filled with an intensity that sent a jolt of terror through Robert. He felt trapped, cornered by the very fear that had consumed him for weeks. In a moment of sheer desperation, he lunged toward the man, shouting, "What do you want from me?" The confrontation escalated quickly. The wild-eyed man raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but Robert, blinded by panic, misinterpreted the movement. In a frantic attempt to protect himself, he shoved the man hard, sending him stumbling backward. The wild-eyed man lost his balance and fell, hitting his head against the edge of a table with a sickening thud. Time seemed to freeze as the room erupted into chaos, screams filling the air as people rushed to the scene. Robert stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, the reality of what had just happened crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The wild-eyed man lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath his head. Panic morphed into horror as Robert realized the gravity of his actions. Regret washed over him in waves, each one more suffocating than the last. He had acted out of fear, and now, in a moment of desperation, he had caused a tragedy that would haunt him forever. As the paramedics arrived and the crowd buzzed with shock and confusion, Robert felt the weight of his actions settle heavily on his shoulders. The consequences of his panic were now painfully clear. He had allowed his fear to dictate his actions, leading to a moment that would forever alter the course of his life. The wild-eyed man, once a figure of his nightmares, now lay before him, a tragic reminder of the darkness that had consumed him. In that moment, Robert understood that the true horror lay not in the shadows of the city, but within himself, and he was left to grapple with the devastating reality of what he had done. In the aftermath of the tragic incident at the party, Robert Kandle found himself engulfed in a suffocating haze of guilt and remorse. The wild-eyed man, once a figure of his nightmares, had become a haunting presence in his mind, a constant reminder of the consequences of his actions. The weight of what had transpired pressed down on him like a heavy shroud, suffocating any semblance of normalcy in his life. Each day felt like a battle against the relentless tide of regret that threatened to pull him under. The impact of the incident rippled through every aspect of Robert's existence. He had always prided himself on being a rational person, someone who could navigate the complexities of life with a level head. Yet in that moment of panic, he had allowed fear to dictate his actions, leading to a catastrophic outcome that he could never take back. The wild-eyed man's face haunted him in his dreams, a ghostly reminder of the life that had been irrevocably altered by Robert's impulsive response. He replayed the scene over and over in his mind, each iteration amplifying his feelings of guilt. What if he had simply walked away? What if he had taken a moment to breathe and assess the situation instead of reacting out of fear? The what-ifs tormented him, a relentless cycle of self-blame that left him feeling trapped in a prison of his own making. As the days turned into weeks, Robert's guilt morphed into a pervasive sense of isolation. Friends and colleagues, who had once been a source of support, now felt like distant figures, their concern tinged with an unspoken judgment. He avoided social gatherings, fearing the whispers and sideways glances that would inevitably follow him. The vibrant city that had once been a playground of possibilities now felt like a desolate landscape, devoid of joy and connection. He spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the weight of his conscience, wondering if he would ever find a way to forgive himself. In his quieter moments, Robert began to reflect on the nature of fear and its consequences. He had always viewed fear as a protective instinct, a necessary response to danger. But now he understood that fear could also be a double-edged sword, capable of distorting reality and leading to devastating outcomes. The wild-eyed man had been a manifestation of his own anxieties, a reflection of the turmoil that had been brewing within him long before their fateful encounter. Robert realized that his inability to confront his fears had ultimately led to the tragic incident, and he felt a deep sense of sorrow for the man whose life had been cut short because of his own shortcomings. This introspection brought Robert to a crucial realization: the importance of addressing mental health. He had spent so long dismissing his feelings, believing that he could simply will away the anxiety that had taken root in his life. But now he understood that mental health was not something to be ignored or brushed aside. It was a vital aspect of overall well-being, one that required attention and care. The stigma surrounding mental health had kept him from seeking help, but the weight of his guilt forced him to confront the reality that he could no longer navigate this journey alone. With a newfound determination, Robert began to explore avenues for healing. He sought therapy, a step that felt both daunting and liberating. In those sessions, he began to unpack the layers of fear and anxiety that had built up over the years, recognizing how they had influenced his actions and decisions. The therapist provided a safe space for him to express his feelings of guilt and remorse, allowing him to confront the pain head-on rather than burying it beneath layers of shame. Through this process, Robert learned that acknowledging his emotions was not a sign of weakness, but rather a courageous step toward healing. As he delved deeper into his mental health journey, Robert also began to educate himself about the complexities of fear and its impact on behavior. He read books and articles, attended workshops, and engaged in discussions about the importance of mental well-being. He discovered that many people grappled with similar feelings of anxiety and guilt, and he found solace in the shared experiences of others. This newfound understanding helped him to reframe his perspective on fear, not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a natural part of the human experience that could be managed and understood. In time, Robert began to feel a glimmer of hope. While the guilt of the incident would always remain a part of him, he realized that it did not have to define him. He could use his experience as a catalyst for change, both within himself and in the way he approached mental health. By addressing his fears and seeking help, he was taking the first steps toward reclaiming his life and finding a path toward forgiveness, both for himself and for the wild-eyed man whose life had been irrevocably altered by a moment of panic. In this journey, Robert discovered that healing was not linear, but rather a complex tapestry woven from threads of vulnerability, resilience, and the courage to confront the shadows that had once consumed him. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us reach a wider audience and encourages us to continue creating content that resonates with viewers like you. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to exploring more narratives that challenge our perceptions and encourage growth. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and let's continue this important conversation.